Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video we're looking at the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So last week we looked at the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, and I think the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer is quite good. But I also think the Clockwork Soul is very good. In fact, I think I mentioned in the last video, I think Sorcerer is one of the classes that has most benefited from having additional source material added. Because when I look at the two base classes, or subclasses, I feel like pretty much everything that's been out has given us just better and more options for Sorcerer. And one of the reasons I think both of these new subclasses are so good is because of the additional spells that they get on their own tables. And historically speaking, the real strength of the Sorcerer class is the meta magic. But the real limitation and weakness of the Sorcerer has always been the tiny number of spells known. So I mentioned this in last week's video, but I don't think I really emphasized it as much as I should. And I've seen other videos from other D&D content creators who've kind of brushed over the spell list. They've just mentioned it, but they haven't really talked about why this is such a big deal. So if you look at the spells known guide or table from the player's handbook, you'll notice that by 10th level, for example, your sorcerer has 11 spells known at 10th level. And by the time you've hit level 17, you've actually capped out with 15 known spells, which means even by 20 you have 15 known spells. So I mean, to go back to that 10th level sorcerer, 11 spells known, that's just barely more than one per level. And then obviously by the time you've hit 17 to 20th level, you're not even having one known spell per character level. So while you can do a lot with those spells, you have a very, very tiny pool of spells to draw from. The Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, on the other hand, their spell list that they give you is 11 spells. The Clockwork Soul here has 10 spells, and these don't count against your spells known, which means that by the time that same 10th level sorcerer rolls around, if you were an Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, you'd have the 11 spells known that the sorcerers come with, and the 11 known spells from your own additional spell list, literally doubling the spells known to 22, right? The Clockwork Soul is going to have 21 by level 10. That is a huge advantage. Now, again, some of those spells you might not like very much, but every time you level, you can trade one of them out for a different spell. And yes, there are a bunch of restrictions, but we're going to talk about some of the choices that, I might want to make if I was playing that character, and what spells I might want to look at. And again, part of this is going to depend on my party composition, right? So as far as like the ideas and the themes of this particular subclass, that's enough about the Aberrant Mind. We already talked about them. We don't need to discuss them more. Just to read like the kind of fluff stuff, right? It says that the cosmic force of order has suffused you with magic. That power arises from a canis or a realm like it, a plane of existence shaped entirely by clockwork efficiency. You or someone from your lineage might have become entangled in the machinations of the Modrons, the orderly beings who inhabit Mechanis. Perhaps your ancestor even took part in the Great Modron March. So the Modrons are basically like machines, right? And they're lawful, neutral, they're consumed with like just order and lawfulness. And especially if you compare them to like the other big like extraplanar lawful races, like the angels, which are lawful good, the devils, which are lawful evil. The angels are also really concerned with being good, and the devils are really concerned with being evil. And it's almost like lawfulness is taking the back seat. With the Modrons, they are just all lawful all the time. And I think that can make a really interesting character to play, influenced by that type of thing, right? Like I'm picturing like a Spock from Star Trek, but with spells, right? Where you're always concerned about like what's logical and orderly and stuff, and you don't understand why your teammates are always, making these rash emotional decisions, and they're just so illogical. If only they could see things as clearly as you do. But, they're too distracted by their petty emotions. What do you do? You're not going to take that dungeon yourself. That is not logical. You've got D6 hit dice. Let the fighter tank it. That's why you put up with that guy and his rash, illogical behavior. Or worse yet, the barbarian who's always giving in to his rages. Just terrible, terrible behavior. But, what are you going to do? Besides, take your share of the treasure, of course. That is also logical. But personally, I just think that could be a fun character to play, you know? Somebody who's always just concerned about how efficient they're being and how logical the party is. And always trying to address situations and problems with that kind of thing in mind. I think that'd just be a lot of fun to roleplay. So anyways, as to the actual subclass features. Clockwork Magic, right at level 1. Best feature the subclass gets. As similar to the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, you get these features at level 1, but you might not always get these spells because you have to be appropriate level to cast a spell, of course, right? But very similar. Spells do not count against you for your spells known. They count as sorcerer spells for you. Whenever you gain a sorcerer level, you can replace one spell gained with this feature with another spell at the same level. The new spell must be an abjuration or transmutation spell from the sorcerer, warlock, or wizard spell list. Excuse me. So, right at level 1, we're going to get Alarm and Protection from Good and Evil. Now, I quite like Alarm as a low-level spell. I think it's excellent. Just helps me to try to rest a little more safely. If somebody disturbs the party camp while we're all asleep, the alarm goes off, and hopefully we don't all die horribly, you know? That being said, though, Alarm is a spell that I'm going to get rid of once I get better options, right? Like, once we get high enough and maybe somebody in the party has, I don't know, like a Lehman's Tiny Hut, or a Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum, or Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, you know, or even Demiplane. Like, what's better than sleeping in your own personal private universe? Nothing, because nothing's getting in there. That's what I love about that spell. Point is, though, before I have those spells available, Alarm's, you know, the best thing I've got available, essentially, right? But once I get to higher levels, I might want to trade Alarm out. As for Protection from Evil and Good, it's not that it's a bad spell for what it does. It's just that it only affects, like, it doesn't affect all evil and good things, right? If you read the spell, you're limited to, like, you know, fae and outsiders, like angels and fiends and stuff like that, celestials and fiends. So it's not that it's a bad spell, but it is pretty circumstantial. Now, under those circumstances, it's decent, so I might want to still keep it. But if you do want to trade it out, other great spells at this level that are available from either your Abjuration or Transmutation schools include Absorb Elements, pretty quality spell there, Mage Armor, Shield, and of course from the Warlock spell list, Armor of Agathis. I love that spell so much. It's better if you're going to be on the front lines a lot and you're going to be doing reflective damage, but even just as a source of temporary hit points, it's still pretty good. So, you know, those are my choices I would personally go with. Level 3, we get Aid and Lesser Restoration. I think both these spells are great. However, depending on the party composition, I might have, say, a Cleric or even a Paladin who gets these spells for free, depending on like their domain list or their, you know, Paladin sublist, right? So if so, I'm going to want to trade these out, right? If not, I'm probably going to keep them because I think they're both pretty good. But I could be taking things like Alter Self. Levitate is a great option. A lot of people only think of levitating themselves or their party members. They don't think of like levitating like an ogre or something, you know? Like that ogre's just going to be smacking you with a club. But if you levitate the guy 15 feet in the air, I mean, maybe he can throw that club once, I guess, but, you know, it's not a boomerang. It's not coming back to him. And, you know, then you can just pick him off with range spells and cantrips and stuff and kill him nice and safely. Now, yes, he does get a saving throw, but still, I think it's a decent choice, right? Magic weapons are a decent choice at lower levels, especially if we don't have any magic items yet, magic weapons. It's also pretty good in like a low magic campaign, but most low magic campaigns don't really, you know, like a lot of like magic using characters running around anyway, so that's probably not going to be an issue for you. Enlarge Reduce is another great choice. I like the flexibility where I could use it to buff a party member and increase their damage, or I could use it to do clever things like shrink things, you know, like shrink that locked door the thief was unable to pick lock on, you know, just shrink the door and I don't got to worry about it. Now it's just a little wee tiny door. So those are the choices I'd probably look at level 2. Well, second level spells, character level 3. So character level 5, third level spells. Dispel Magic and Protection from Energy. Dispel Magic is a great spell. I'm just going to keep that one because I was going to probably have to take it anyways. So nothing wrong with that. Protection from Energy is one I'm probably going to trade. And it's not that Protection from Energy is necessarily a bad spell, but again, it's quite circumstantial. The main reason I'm going to trade it out, though, is because the other options at level 3 are just so strong. Fly, haste, slow, and of course, counterspell. What's better than dispel magic? Counterspell. Not that dispel magic isn't great. I already said we're going to keep that one. But man, counterspell is just a complete game changer. And fly, haste, and slow are all just excellent spells. So, bye-bye protection from energy. That's what we're saying. Character level 7, so 4th level spells. Freedom of movement and summon construct. Freedom of movement isn't a bad spell, but I feel like if it was a 2nd level spell, it would be amazing. If it was a 3rd level spell, it would be pretty good. But as a 4th level spell, it just feels like it's a really high level spell slot for what I'm getting. Now, in certain fights, it can be a complete game changer. And especially being a sorcerer, I might be able to twin that and hit 2 party members, and that could be the difference between our party all being entangled and then dying horribly, or being able to fight efficiently still. Again, though, it is a very circumstantial spell, and I would probably rather just trade it out, to be honest. As for Summon Construct, I'm just going to keep that one. I mentioned this with the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. So much for not talking about the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer anymore. But they got Summon Aberration, we get Summon Construct. The problem is that sorcerers just don't get any good summoning spells. And I personally really like summoning spells. I like the fact that it increases the party's efficiency a lot by just adding more actions to our side of the table. I like that I could use it strategically and put it on the battlefield or somewhere where it might be able to, obstruct enemy movement or create opportunity attacks if stuff tries to get past that and attack me, I just think that, it's, even if it's just as a source of extra damage, it's still pretty nice to have it out there. So I personally really like these type of spells. But I also know there are gaming tables where people just don't like summoning spells. Either the DM doesn't, or maybe your party members don't because they think it slows the game down too much, or whatever. In which case, obviously, under those circumstances, I'm just going to bend to the party's will and get along, and they'll probably trade it out for something. Maybe trade out my party members, though, for better party members. That's also worthy of consideration. Ones who don't mind Summon Construct so much, because it's a great spell. If I am trading it, though, I'm probably, and Freedom of Movement, which I'm probably going to be trading. I think some really strong choices appear at level 4 here. Polymorph, of course, one of the best 4th level spells in the game. Banishment. Again, Banishment is one of these spells that it is all or nothing, right? But because I'm a sorcerer, because I could have things like a hidden spell, I could give them disadvantage on the saving throw, and that makes Banishment a lot more likely to stick. I like Banishment as well. You could be grabbing Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum. Why not? I like Stone Shape as well. Stone Shape is one of those ones where you have to be kind of clever to use it sometimes. You might want to know the layout of the dungeon, but sometimes there's a secret door there, you couldn't find it, or maybe you just think there should have been one. Stone Shape that wall and find out for real, Why not? It is a pretty handy spell to have. So I'm probably looking something along those lines, though. So finally, 9th level, 5th level spells, we get Greater Restoration and Wall of Force. So we already talked about Lesser Restoration. I feel the same thing about Greater Restoration, right? If I have like a cleric who has it on a domain spell list, I'm going to get rid of this. If I have a paladin who has this on like a spell list, I'm probably stuck with it because he's not going to get that until like level 19 or whatever. Or 17, I guess it is. But when he does, maybe I'll trade it out. Either way, I think Greater Restoration is a pretty good spell. So, I don't mind keeping it at all. But if I am going to trade it out, we'll talk about the options in a minute. Wall of Force, on the other hand, that thing is going nowhere. I love Wall of Force. It is one of the best 5th level spells in the game. No saving throw, battlefield control. That is the kind of stuff I love in this game. That is right up my alley. So I am never trading that spell out. As for what I would trade to, though, there's not a lot of great choices at level 5. This is one of the other reasons I might just keep Greater Restoration. There's just not a lot of competition. But there is Telekinesis, and Transmute Rock. And both of those aren't bad spells either. So if I do trade it out, not Wall Force, of course. I already said that thing's going nowhere. But if I do trade out my Greater Restoration, it's probably going to be for one of those two. But again, just keeping Greater Restoration isn't a bad choice either. So whenever you're casting any of your sorcerer spells, you also get Manifestations of Order, which is more of like a fluff ability. But it's kind of cool, you know, like you roll a d6 and you get some sort of spectral manifestation. Like you might get little cogwheels that hover around behind you, you know. Hands of a clock spin in your eyes. Your skin glows with brassy sheen. I mean, you can read the list yourself, but kind of cool effects. I sort of like that idea that, you know, whenever I use my magic, I'm like tapping into this other realm and something kind of weird manifests itself. Not necessarily a great combination with Subtle Spell, but we'll assume that Subtle Spell negates that as well. So, you know, if I was a DM, I would definitely rule it that way anyways. So, finally, moving on to our other level 1 ability. That's right, we're still on level 1 abilities. You get Restore Balance. Your connection to the plane of absolute order allows you to equalize chaotic moments. When a creature you can see within 60 feet of you is about to roll a d20 with advantage or disadvantage, you can use your reaction to prevent the roll from being affected by advantage and disadvantage. You can use this feature a number of times equal to proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Now, at first I thought this ability was even better than it was, because I thought you could negate the advantage or disadvantage, but it says you stop it from being affected by advantage and disadvantage. So I was hoping that if I had like a rogue and he has advantage because he's going to use like his aim shot or something like that, but then something happens and he gets disadvantage, I could just negate that disadvantage and give him advantage again, but you can't. So it just negates all of it. But, you know, in a lot of circumstances, that's still pretty good. The thing I like about this ability, and I don't think it's like an A tier or S tier ability, but it is pretty good because it's one that I know I'm going to use a lot, right? My party still is going to have times where we attack with disadvantage or somebody attacks us with advantage. And being able to negate that multiple times a day is really nice. So, I mean, is it a complete game changer? No, but it's an ability that has a nice effect that I will guaranteed use a lot over the course of a campaign. So to me, that's a really, really solid ability. Level 6, Bastion of Law. You can tap into the grand equation of existence to imbue a creature with a shining shield of order. As an action, you can expend 1 to 5 sorcery points to create a magical ward around yourself or another creature you can see within 30 feet of you. The ward lasts until you finish a long rest or until you use this feature again. The ward is represented by a number of d8s equal to the number of sorcery points spent to create it. When the warded creature takes damage, it can expend a number of those dice, roll them, and reduce the damage taken by the total rolled on those dice. I think it's a pretty strong ability. It's obviously very reminiscent of the Abjuration Wizard with their ward, and they can project it at level 6 to help other people. Theirs is a little more flexible though, because theirs just stays on them, and then as a reaction at level 6, they can start projecting that ward onto somebody else to negate some damage. Yours, you have to kind of plan in advance, because you either put it on yourself or you put it on someone else, and once it's on them, it's there until you finish a long rest or put it on someone else, right? So it's not like this reactive thing. It's more like a proactive, which in this case is actually worse. That said, though, I still think this is a great ability. Even if I'm just using it on myself to negate damage and prevent me from having to make concentration saving throws, that alone is a great ability. But also, this isn't temporary hit points, so it will stack with temporary hit points. So I like that a lot. And, you know, 5d8 is a pretty heavy investment, but negating 5 sorcery points, but negating 5d8 damage is a lot of damage. So I do think that's a pretty good ability. I'm probably going to be mostly looking to use it on whoever's going to be mostly concentrating and maintaining concentration on spells in the party. And that might be me, right? But it might be, you know, maybe we got a wizard or a cleric or somebody else, and they're really doing a lot of concentration spells, and I'm more doing like blasty type spells a lot of the time, right? Then I might be looking to put it on them and kind of just allow them to do their thing a lot more frequently. Either way, I still think it's a great ability. And like I said, with the Restore Balance ability at level 1, it's one that I know that I'm going to be able to use throughout the campaign, and it's going to get mileage. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. Level 14, Trance of Order. You gain the ability to align your consciousness to the endless calculations of mechanics. As a bonus action, you can enter this state for 1 minute. For the duration, attack rolls against you can't benefit from advantage, and whenever you make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, you can treat a roll of 9 or lower on the d20 as a 10. Once you use this bonus action, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest, unless you spend 5 sorcery points to use it again. So spending 5 sorcery points to use it again is a fairly heavy cost, but I don't think it's bad, because I actually think it's a pretty solid ability. It's not one attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. It's all the ones you have to make for a minute. That is pretty good. I mean, anytime you're rolling a 9 or lower, it's just treated as a 10. Especially if you're using like spell attacks or making a bunch of saving throws. That's probably going to be good enough to succeed the majority of the time. And like I said, that's 1 straight minute of just not really having to worry about missing on spell attacks, not missing saving throws, and I mean, maybe you could just get crushed for a concentration check. You might still miss it, but generally, you know, you're all proficient on con saves as a sorcerer, assuming even with like a 14 con, by the time you're level 4, you know, by the time you're level 14 with a 14 con, it's a +2. Your proficiency bonus is +4 at that point, I believe. It might be even +5. It might be +5 at level 13, I think. You know, that's a pretty hefty bonus, and if you just automatically have at least a 10, that's going to be a lot of made saving throws. So, I think that is pretty good. Level 18, Clockwork Cavalcade. You summon spirits of order to expunge disorder around you. As an action, you summon the spirits in a 30-foot cube originating from you. The spirits look like Modrons or other constructs of your choice. The spirits are intangible and invulnerable, and they create the following effects within the cube before vanishing. The spirits restore up to 100 hit points, divided as you choose among any number of creatures of your choice in the cube. So, 100 hit point heal divided up any way you want among any number of creatures inside the cube. Any damaged objects entirely in the cube are repaired instantly. A little more circumstantial, but you know, not terrible. Every spell of 6th level or lower ends on creatures and objects of your choice in the cube. Once you use this action, you can't use it again unless you finish a long rest, unless you spend 7 sorcery points to use it again. So once again, 7 sorcery points is a lot, but I do like the fact that that's an option, that I could spend the sorcery points to reuse it again. And I've heard some people complain that 100 hit point heal by level 18 isn't super strong, and they're not wrong, but you know, that's enough to pick up a down party member and put them up to a very high hit point total, where they're not just going to go down instantly again, probably, you know? Especially if that was like the cleric or someone, you know? I like the fact that you can split it up between a bunch of different creatures. You could heal yourself, you can heal your allies, you can heal all of you at once, you know? 100 hit point heal is nothing to sneeze at. That's not a bad ability by any means. Like I said, repairing damaged objects, you know, that could be handy, depending on the circumstance, of course. If it only had that ability, I would not be excited at all, but combined with a 100 hit point heal, that's not bad. But dispelling every spell of 6th or lower level on creatures and objects of my choice within the cube is excellent. It's not going to affect our party members. This is one thing we find with some of these high level, like Mordenkainen's Disjunction and some of these other spells, right? Or Anti-Magic Shell, right? A lot of times they're also countering out beneficial party members' effects or even their magic items. That's not quite so great. The fact that it's just selective, that I can choose who's affected and who isn't, that there's no dice rolls, it's just any spell effects of 6th level or lower, boom, gone. I like that a lot. So I do think this is a pretty potent ability. Am I going to be getting in a lot of situations where I have to use it twice or 3 times and I'm sacrificing a bunch of sorcery points? Probably not. In which case it basically just becomes a once per long rest ability. But I do like the fact that I have that option of maybe using it a second time. I hopefully don't need it a second time, but I think it's not a bad ability as far as, these things go, right? And as an 18th level capstone, it is pretty decent in my opinion. So overall, I do quite like the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but I actually, in my last campaign, and I didn't create this idea on my own. There's a group called Kobold Press. I've mentioned them in a couple of my other videos because I reviewed their Creature Codex and their Tome of Beasts. And they're basically just like additional monster manuals, right, with 600 plus monsters per book. And I really liked them. I thought they had some really creative stuff in there. They introduced a lot of new mechanics, but using the actual 5e mechanics, just using them in creative ways. And I thought that was some pretty good stuff. But they also came up with a bunch of like little short, basically pamphlet-sized things called the Books of Magic. And they had, one of them was like Clockwork Magic. And they had Clockwork Wizards and Clockwork Warlocks. So I actually had an NPC named Sardat, and her brother were met by the party members at one point. They teamed up with them. Her brother was like this clockwork automaton that she had made. He was basically like a warforged, and he died, but she'd taken his soul and put it into this gem and created this like artificial body for him, which he wasn't super happy about. He wasn't like terribly upset either. He's just, now he felt like he was a bit of a freak, right? So there's some RP stuff there. But she was like a Clockwork Soul Warlock eventually, or essentially, and she worshipped this thing called the Celestial Machine. I wish I would have had the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer available back then, because then that's entirely what she would have been. But I thought it was kind of an interesting character. I quite liked her and her brother both. They teamed up with the party, and the party helped them save a bunch of their villagers and stuff. And then eventually she ended up coming with the party back to like their own continent, because this was all on a different continent. And she ended up joining like the School of Magic that the one player character was a member of. And then, she could learn their magic and they could learn hers and stuff like that, right? So she ended up joining the Arcanist Guild. And, she's still technically around in that city. And she's actually been mentioned in my new campaign, which I don't think anybody noticed except for Brendan, because you're all terrible. You're all terrible equally, but some are more terrible than others, like Animal Farm. Anyways, those are my main thoughts on it, though. I think it's an excellent subclass. And like I said, I feel like, in general, both of these new sorcerer subclasses are very strong. I like a lot of the themes and roleplay ideas that come to mind when you think of the characters. I don't think it's super hard to be like, oh, how am I going to play this character? I just think it would be fun. Now, would I want to play like 5 Clockwork Soul Sorcerers that all end up being spot clones? Probably not, but I think one would be a lot of fun, right? So, there is that. But I think mechanically, that was not meant to be a pun, but mechanically I think it's a very strong subclass, and I just think it's really, really good. So anyways, those are my thoughts and feelings on the subclass. Sounds like somebody upstairs is using the exercise bike, so that's great. That's definitely a good sign that it's time to wrap up the video. So anyways, feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, all that stuff. And most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. I always read the comments. It might take me a while to get to them, but I always read all the comments on every one of my videos. And also, we're getting very, very close. Last I saw, we had 499 subscribers. So we're very close to the magical 500 mark. And I do plan on buying myself a microphone sometime soon. So hopefully the audio quality will improve slightly. It'll improve by 10%, maybe more, but 10%. That's the floor we're aiming at here. Keep our expectations low. Anyways, that's everything. I'll see you next time. Bye.